We'll start off at the start. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into music, and then move further on into electronic music?
I started playing guitar when I was 14. I grew up around my father playing music, so always had guitars around. He would play in various bands and folk things up and down the East Coast in the 60s and 70s. So I kind of had that side of musical life. And I mean, I was really into like early, like 8, 9 years old, I was into my brother's music, which was all like really weird industrial, new wave stuff.
Yeah,
This
nice,
is like
yeah.
late 80s. And then Nirvana kind of came out, and I was 14, so it was a perfect little and I learned how to play guitar. I wanted to be like Kurt Cobain. From there, I just started messing around. My dad had a little Tascam 4-track recorder, so I'd get the guitar and I'd start like playing in that, and I'd do overdubs with my voice. And then my dad had this little DR5 drum box from Roland, kind of an accompaniment
Yeah.
rhythm box, and I started programming, sequencing drum beats there, and it was just really weird, kind of acoustic experimental stuff. And I had the cassette tape in the Tascam that I could kind of manipulate as well. And then, yeah, from there, slowly kind of got back into the weird stuff that my brother was into, and I realized I could start making more electronic sounding things. So I would, try to do a bit more of like the 4/4 kick drum, and I'd go to guitar centers back then and be like, hey, like these guys are making this sound with, it was like Chemical Brothers or something. I'm like, I want to sound like this. Like, what do I do? And the guy's like, oh, you need a sampler. Like, get one of these. And so I'd ask my parents for, Christmas. I'd be like, hey, I need this sampler. This is going to be what I need.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they get me that, and slowly just started piecing together a studio when I was like 15, 16.
Yeah, yeah. So you were experimenting from the get-go, basically with tape, and then further on when you had a bigger studio.
Yeah.
I mean, where did that sense of adventure come from sonically?
I don't know. I mean, early on, I had like an Acer like computer. This is like early '90s, and it had Sound Blaster, and I started cutting up CDs, and I was just like putting soundtracks together with like Madonna songs, and it was just fun, like to look at audio on a screen and just cut and paste it and like loop it and just kind of sound collage stuff. So it's what always like got me going and got me excited. Yeah.
Were you trying to sound like anyone in particular? Or
No, I think I was just trying to figure it out. Yeah. And there was no real direct thing, but I always like I like to think like Daft Punk Homework was like a really good like turning point for me, because early on, like I really wanted to sound like a lot of the songs there, but I hated like the more dance stuff and the house stuff. But as I learned more and more about dance music, I think every song on that album opened up more and more to me. So that was like a really good like mirror of where I stood in my evolution of dance music, is how much I could get into like the weirder stuff on that album.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you were completely self-taught. Did you teach yourself mixing as well?
Yeah, but that's happening now. It came way later, like watching videos like Point Blank, and I'm always like on the internet just looking up things, and it's fun. It's a never-ending process there. But I try to separate the two. I try to just create still, and then let those feelings happen naturally, and not overthink it with the mixing end until much later.
Yeah, so you're using samplers originally, then you started using software. I mean, what's your setup like now? Are you half and half?
Yeah, I've always collected weird little bits of gear and stuff. So yeah, I've got my synths, classic synths. I've got some drum machines as well. I really like the Electron stuff. Octatrack is always, it's in my DJ set. It's with me in the hotel room, so it's really fun to just plug
Sleep
in.
with it.
Yeah, yeah. I take it out to movies and dinner, and no, it's amazing. You can do anything with an Octatrack. Like if you guys ever get your hands on one, or if you haven't, I like to consider it like artificial intelligence for music, because you can really, it starts to have a mind of its own. Like you can record every parameter, and you can really just bend like massive audio samples. Like I've got I think an 80 gigabyte memory card in the back of it. So it's a computer like in this box that just can store so much data, and it just can record all your movements and everything. So you can just time stretch to your heart's content, and it's got really good sound engines on it. So it's big and bold and punchy.
I mean, it's interesting that you, even though you had a workflow set in Ableton, you decided to challenge yourself and move to Logic and learn it, even though it might have been frustrating at first. Do you think that's something that everyone should do, is make themselves a little bit uncomfortable when making music?
Yeah, yeah, it's not a bad thing to do. Mainly if you kind of get set in your ways, that's the best way. But if you're still like starting out and you're just learning Logic or Ableton for the first time, and don't freak yourself out by trying to learn too much at once. But for me, I had gotten to a point in Ableton where I don't know, I just wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to date other people.
You could just use Rewire, threesome.
That's true.
Yeah. Um, so anyway, moving on.
Don't
I just
tell my
want to ask
3D
you a little
listeners.
bit about the main challenges for you, because I think in the studio you talk about mixing and it's been progressing as you went along.
Mhm.
What do you really struggle with when you're in the studio? What do you get frustrated with?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm always a bit like perplexed at how certain people just have this like perfect like radio sound, whether it's like an EDM thing or like it's just like some of those tracks are just so like perfectly mixed. And I think there's this like holy grail of mixing, and I don't know if like these guys, you see them there and they're like their studio with they're just doing this track and they're like, yeah, and then I did this and this and this, and then it's like it just sounds so good. So I feel like I kind of missed out on like a certain basic level of mixing techniques. So I'm
Yeah.
always just searching for that, how to get things to sit perfectly. And I've realized as I've gotten older, back when I started making techno music, it was so far removed from things on TV. There was no, I remember going to like Europe for the first time and seeing like car commercials with techno music in it and just thinking, wow, like they really get it over here. Like they're putting techno music in car commercials. Like what? And like obviously it's like everything's like that now. Like it's all electronic music. But back then we were still like this like weird underdog of a music scene. Like the guys that were going to SAE weren't going back and making like dance music. Like the guys that were learning how to mix and like do this stuff, they were like miking drum sets for Aerosmith recordings or something. Like that was a holy grail. But now it's like, oh yeah, you want to be like David Guetta's like engineer. It's like it's totally switched. So when I was starting, like it was just like throw a limiter on it and like crank it up and just see what happens. Whereas now it's like you're competing with these guys that went to this training, and not competing, but like those are your peers now. There's guys that really know how to like mix and how to like make the sub just perfect.
So I guess we should move on to your remix. So this is a
Yeah.
new remix for Left Field, right?
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah, the song's called Universal Everything. Left Field, kind of a legendary, UK artist. I was really honored to be asked to do it, and yeah, we'll just kind of start a quarter of the way through and play a bit of it, and you guys get like a nice feel for most of everything that's happening, and then we'll just kind of break it down piece by piece after that.
Sounds good.
Here we go.
Maybe we could start with the classic problem or solution for club music, the kick and the bass.
Oh yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you approach in general? I mean, do you have some go-to kick samples, or do you create them every time?
It's different every time. I have lots of samples that I really like, and then I use bassism every now and then just to
Oh,
get
yeah,
a
cool.
really like fat big one. But sometimes I find like a combination of just a deep kick and a top kick like really work for me. So yeah, let's hear that. So there's my deep kick. I didn't really do much to it. It's just essentially like the straight sample, and I knew if I mixed around that, I wouldn't really have to boost anything in it. This like sample is called the best bass drum ever. 2. So there's a few others, but this one always seems to work, and it's so like warm and fat,
Yeah,
and
it's
like
really
I just,
nice.
it's a really subtle. Like the mix, as you heard, it's very long and kind of just it's a very slow evolving track. It's not a really intense like hands in the air kind of thing. It's a bit more of a slow breather, and this kick worked well for that. And then I had the top kick here. So that just adds a bit more. And I actually put this Waves TransX multi plugin on it, which is essentially like a crazy, I think, multi-band compressor. Hear it by itself. And I think it's peaking a little bit. I was trying to trim it. But you can see where I boosted things here, and I guess above like 250, it just kind of is like nutty. So this is without it. It's a bit more like muffled and not as present, but just with that, it gave it a perfect little like right on
Yeah.
top.
And you're taking out the space that the other sub kick will replace.
Exactly, totally. So yeah, together, just what I needed. Something really subtle for this. Sometimes I do, like I've heard people do put reverb on the kicks to like really like draw it all together, but then I've heard other people say like no reverb at all because you really want like tightness. And I mean, if you're playing these huge like festivals and stuff, chances are like there's gonna be tons of reverb like already there, and you don't want to overdo it. Use like the venues. Same with compression. Like rely on the compressors. The compressors are gonna be at the club and the venues, so you're not totally over squashing something. Yeah, and then the sub right here, it's just a Moog Voyager. Can you guys feel the bass out there at all? Like, okay, cool. Because it is a very, I guess, key part of this track. I can turn the booth a little bit. What I like to do is just kind of take like a Moog, like Voyager or something, and I just kind of play live. So that's the loop I used, I believe. But then if I go to the beginning, I think that's the actual sample, but I like to just freestyle. So I'll take the Moog and I'll just kind of just go crazy with it and like be on the filter. And the Moogs are great when you get the resonance like really high up, and then you kind of take the cutoff down. You can get these really like weird rolling, deep like subtones. And so I'll just kind of freak out on that for about 2 minutes and just record that into an input on Ableton, and take the best little 1-bar loop, at the end, and try to like make sure it's like synced somewhat with the pitch of the song and all that. And then, yeah, I ended up with that one. And then for that, I just did a really, really, really slight compressor sidechain. The pumping thing is like, it's fun, you can get some really cool effects with it. I don't like to overdo it, but for the bass, at least I wanted it to duck out enough for these kicks, And you can't really hear it. It doesn't sound like this pumping bass line, but it is ducking just enough under each instance of the kick, so you're not really like cluttering things up too much.
Yeah. Can we hear it with the sidechain off? Just.
Oh yeah, totally. It's not that bad. It was really subtle, and some people like it. To overlap too. And if you want to like kind of make sure your frequencies aren't interfering with each other, you can do that. And like, I usually sometimes will take a frequency spectrum analyzer and see exactly where the kick's hitting, and then kind of dip that out in the sub a bit. But this song was really straightforward. It's not a good example of like me going crazy with plugins, because I think I was just trying to keep it very simple. And then the last thing I did actually on the sub was a mono. I went to the Ableton utility and just tried to put a mono in there, so I wouldn't get too much weirdness, because sometimes the Voyagers, if you do like a spatial like left to right thing with it, and like it's very quick to like throw things to left or right too much. And I think for the sub, you definitely want that like straightforward, like in your belly, no matter where you're playing. So yeah, I just put that on there, and then you can see like just in the green level meter, a little bit harder on the left is happening, and then yeah, you kind of see the wave here too. Like the left wave is just a bit fatter. So in that sense, I just really wanted to make sure it was coming through in mono. Yeah. That's kick and bass.
Is that how a track starts? Would you roll a kick drum for a while, play around with it?
Sometimes. A remix is a little bit different. So, with the remix, you're given like all the pieces and the parts. So Left Field, gave me about, let's go to my stems folder here, maybe about like 25 like samples to work with. And I really like, to be honest with you, I struggled with this one for a bit, because you don't necessarily want to just lay their track out and then like kind of redo. My remixes, I love not to just do the arrangement a different way. I really like to get in there and twist the song up, and sometimes I just take the least amount from the original that just gives me that feeling. Like I want to go somewhere else entirely, but I want it to come directly from the original song for remix. So for this one, I was just searching. I was going through all the different like sounds. This is all original stuff here. So these are like their intro files. And then I think I went with, I soloed it here. So what I ended up doing was using this track in the beginning. This is how I built the song. So I have a 1-bar loop. This entire wave is their original thing. And then what I did was I got some Ableton effects out. The corpus is really cool. It's kind of like a resonant, it just adds like really weird harmonics and stuff. So this is everything. Let me take it back. This is the corpus on the beginning. I think I tweaked some things, and then you can kind of just, play with a lot of that. And then I put a grain delay on it. Just add a lot more motion and like movement and stuff. And then I added a filter delay on top of that. And finally, ricochet plugin. It's a delay as well from audio damage. And then what I did was essentially we just like route that out to a separate channel. So, audio out to number 2. And then I would do in audio, and I'd arm this to record, and then I would just start fresh. So I would keep this one playing. So you have it recording here live. And then I just would go to town. I started moving this like loop point around. And since you have those delays, it's really like you're not going to hear any clipping between like the tracks, or the loop point when you move it around. So it's just a way for me to really use like the original sound file, but like totally change it and do something completely different with it. And then I think I went down to like a really short like 16th bar like loop. And then I would tweak the corpus while I was doing that too. I'd kind of jump around. And then I'd go back, maybe like tweak the grain delay a bit. And then, yeah, you just stop it. Try to record your tail. And then stop that. And then I have this big file. So I knew that this now is like, inherent of the original song. And then I could start scrolling through here and see what I like. So from there, I got this. This is the original process track that I got from doing what I just did like that earlier in the studio. And turn off the double chain so we don't re-affect it. There you go.
Sounded pretty good though.
Yeah. Well, tracks are never done. So yeah, this is what I ended up using. Or this is my original take, and then what I ended up using was this loop. So this is way down the way at measure 130. It's a 1-bar loop. So out of all that, all the chaining and the processing, this is the one thing I used for the remix. But I got there, and like it is from the original song. It's just different. So yeah, from that I felt the vibe. Like that right there was like, okay.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Like that's an emotion. Like that's some soul. And then yeah, maybe from there I did the kick, So yeah, there's feeling now. There's something like you're in the studio and you're like, okay, cool. And I worked on this remix for like maybe 4 days, 5 days before this and wasn't getting anywhere. So I was really frustrated. And I finally just did that thing where I routed everything, and I'd never done it before. I've never done that sequence of like grain delay, filter delay, move the loop points around, like those something I'd never done before. So just in that sense of play and that sense of experimentation, you get this new thing that ends up leading you where you need to go. And yeah, that's the beginning.
Cool. So there's also a vocal sample in here, right? Is that or
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you're kind of known for your vocal treatments and your use of vocals in your tracks. How did you process the vocal on this track, and how do you approach it in general?
Yeah, I mean, real simple for this. This is their track. Was this just universal everything? And I just had a filter on it, like the Ableton's auto filter, a little compressor, just like a little cut off below like 113, just so it didn't get in the way of everything else. And it was all about like stripping back, I wanted to just really, I wanted this song to just be so arcing slowly, and to do 8 bars of this repeating universal everything where the filter starts down here and just slowly opens up that way. That's it's kind of reminiscent of the older records that I used to play that are just long and dreamy and like really long dreamscape kind of things. And I think which also kind of makes me think of left field.
The arrangement in this, when you mentioned the arc, I mean, how do you approach arrangement? Because coming from a live performance ethos, like you mentioned, is that the same in the studio? Do you jam things out a lot the same way you did there with hardware too?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the jam here, the main jam after I got all that stuff going, was this Moog Voyager take, which really to me like set the tone after I had that loop. Like I did this, and once I got it, I was just like, whoa, like I'm impressed, Matt. Like good job. No, because like I'm not usually very melodically like I don't make these giant dreamscapes. But what I did here, this is the Voyager coming in, and it's just a loop of like I took the first 4 bars, looped it. Here's a full track, and then I wanted to show you what I did. This is the original track here called A Long Wave. So this was me just freestyling over the loop, over their loop, and over the kick drum. So this is me just in the studio. I had like my hand on the cutoff on the Voyager. I was playing the keys live. It's just like 3 notes. And I just did it. Like I kind of kept like slowly like turning up the cutoff and like, rolling my head around in like the studio. It's like it's the moment you need to get to, when you're making music, you have to go somewhere else. You can't be like the hired gun doing a remix like in your basement worried about where you're eating for lunch, like it's not about that then. Like you have to be deep in the spirit of the music, and there's a lot of things that can pull you away from that, and you need to like get back to it if you're gonna do this for real at that moment. So yeah, I just kept opening it up, and then I got real crazy over here. Maybe let's do some modulation wheel, and then it all just kind of goes to shit, like really weird, like pitchy stuff, like starts going down, and it shouldn't work, it shouldn't work that way. And it's like the point where you're doing it and you're recording it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to use this part, but let me just keep recording anyways, because you never know. Yeah, the weird pitchy stuff here. Yeah. So it like changes keys, like it's kind of antique key at this point. It's just super messy and noisy. And this is a Voyager, by the way, running through like a chain of Ableton delays and grain delays and stuff. I tried to recreate that over here for y'all. So I just used a Mini Monster synth just to kind of replicate what the real Voyager was doing. So yeah, without all of that, straight synth is. And then add grain delay, add this filter delay, and then last but not least, this giant like ricochet delay, which kind of gets rid of, it's really wet, so it gets rid of your attack, so you're kind of just like dreamy. And then this is what I would have done on like the Moog with my hand. So yeah, and I just recorded that like I did the other track, and then I get this giant thing and it becomes part of the song. And you can hear it here, and then so what I did, like I said, you kind of freestyle the whole time, but you end up cutting. That's the beauty of Ableton and DAWs. You can completely like only use the best stuff that you got, when you freestyle. So then I use that pitchy weird stuff in the breakdown. So now that stuff works. It's like it's very dramatic and atmospheric, and it's okay to go anti, key and like get out of it all. And the vocals come back, and then yeah, just kind of ramps back up. And then like the notes come back right there. So it's just like swell of like chaos, and then it just kind of returns to the beautiful melodic pattern that was happening before. Kind of stripped down my studio recently. I just have a Moog Voyager, dark time sequencer, and Ableton, just for fun, because I have a new baby and I have a daughter, and it's just like, no way do I have time to set up my studio right now. Add that as a great excuse to try something different. You know, I'm not feeling bad about it. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, I can't sit in a box and make music all day. No, I'm gonna like strip it down and like do something different. I'm gonna use this like change of pace in my life to work differently. And I think if you look at things like that, then yeah, the sky's the limit. So I got all my percussion here. This is all Moog, just doing the same thing. Little mid thing, low perk. And it's just me tweaking, you know, little stuff. And then when it's all together, you know, it kind of works. Like, yeah, that's your outro. Same thing. That end bell's just there. Yeah.
How much do you go in terms of engineering, or you just kind of go with the vibe, roll your head around a little bit and see what happens?
I try to do that, a lot of that first,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
I will
So you kind of keep the creative part and the scientific part separate.
try to, but then there's a few things like adding, you know, sweeping off everything under a certain frequency. Like
Sure.
those little things are just do it now. It's quick, you know, get
Yeah.
it over with. But I try not to obsess about frequencies, you know, until the very end. And then sometimes I just put like a big like multi-band compressor, just something on the master, and like just hear where I want things to really pop out, you know, and like go crazy with that, and then maybe turn it off, and then remember like, oh yeah, that rim really popped out, that rim shot, or that, you know, that more mid-range aggressive stuff was happening there. So I'll do that, you know, after the fact, work on a little bit of a master chain. Like this one, I had two versions I rendered. One was a digital master, and then one was just dry, and I ended up using the dry one better, sending that to the mastering. I took the master output down a little bit, and it ended up working.
And for your master channel, is that something you would, if you wanted to test something in your DJ set, for example, that hadn't come out yet or hadn't been submitted to the label, is there a mastering chain you go to for that? Just to make it a little bit louder?
Yeah. Usually I use the, what is the Mag EQ4?
From Brainworks.
Yeah, it's so good, this stuff. So I just boost a little bit of sub there and a little bit of like the low, and then I take out some of the mids and then boost the top. And then I like also the Brainwork big ass mofo.
BX Digital, yeah.
Get a little bit of stereo width like increased. I did a track for Tegan and Sarah when they did a Tears for Fears cover, and I was using this for the first time, and every time you get something for the first time, you like go crazy with it.
Overdo it, yeah.
Yeah, and so like the mastering guy like wrote me back. He's like, just so you know, like this mix is way too wide, and I was like, oh, like sorry. I go very easily on it now. A little presence shift here, and then yeah, mainly just go to like the mono section, the mono maker, and I usually cut off a lot of stuff under like 200, just so there's like this real thick middle that like comes up at you, and everything else on top is spread out a bit. Really subtle again. Like in my younger days, it was very extreme, and sometimes I get extreme too. Like I'll put a really heavy like compressor on it just to see what happens to everything. But at that point, you do lose a bit of the punch and the clarity, and it's better to like maybe do that on just your percussion tracks.
What would be your piece of advice for anyone who's in a bedroom producer right now, who's like making tracks and looking where to go next?
I mean, when I was younger, I just threw like a limiter on everything and squashed the hell out of everything, and it was like super loud, and it made me feel really good about my music. And I'd go and I'd DJ it at like the bar, and it sounded like just as loud as the mastered records I was playing. And my thing was like, I'd set speakers on fire. It happened a couple times, like little like bar speaker like this stuff, and there'd be like flames like coming out of the porthole. Like I don't know how it happened, but there's evidence, like there's witnesses that you know, my
You're
early
secretly happy about that.
yeah, my early audience stuff. I'd take it to like this little bar in Ann Arbor, and I'd play it, and like the port would be glowing. I'd be like frying the internals, and it was just horrible, like over loud stuff. But not the music. Music was great, but but yeah, like that made me feel good. Like, you know, you're 21 years old, and like you're like, yeah, I'm making the speakers light up on fire. Like my stuff sounds great. So yeah, and then live too. Like you asked me, do I do some mastering? And since I do play live shows, Audion, if I go up after like a DJ like Rich, or you know, I play Time Warp in between Sven Vaith and Rich, and if I don't have this like bigger like mastered sounding tracks, you know, and I didn't have time to send them off to a mastering engineer beforehand, something I just made on the laptop in the hotel that day, like I gotta put some sort of like limiter on it. I have to bring it up a bit, like, 'cause it's gotta be pretty full. but then I'll usually take that off before I send it to get professionally mastered. Yeah.
So your advice would be, don't just put a massive limit on everything, or do if you want the speakers to go on fire.
Do if you want to like feel like a badass. Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Nice one. So has anyone got any questions in the audience? Yes, straight away.
Hi, thank you for joining us. I just got a question in regards to one of your tracks, Mouth to Mouth. How exactly did you capture that moment in time? Like, was it a live thing? Was it more arranged?
It was completely live in the sense that it was on Ableton. And like I said at the panel, I kind of went to Berlin for a week and came back with all this inspiration. And I just treated it kind of like a live set in the sense that I had the kick, I had hi-hats, drums, like real simple clap, like a 909 clap. And then I just found that dun, 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 like just a real simple like organ thing. And it was just this like moment where it all kind of like fit together sonically. And then in the same like day, I think I made the whole song probably in like 5 hours. And at the end of it, I just kind of did a live recording where I kind of recorded all my movements. I might have had like a really simple like MIDI controller with like some knobs and just kind of tweaked the synth as it went along. It happens like every 16 bars, you just get that real big like synth splash. And then from there, I just kind of like kept going. And I think at like minute 12 or 13, I was kind of like, okay, well, I think it's done. And then I stopped and I had it. And then I just went back and like kind of cleaned up the mutes and like a few of like the parameter tweaks. Like I didn't want to like interfere too much with what I did live, but just like the simple like kick drum mutes. And I recently went back to like remix it for like the modern age, added like a new kick and stuff. And I noticed that it followed no format of how this would, where it's like, okay, like bar 33, boom, like something happens. 65, like this cuts out. Breakdown at 129. Now we're so regimented in this like really strict formula of like, okay, like groove, drop, more groove, drop out, big breakdown, hands in the air, like that works. Then Rich will play a track like that in front of like 10,000 people and they all go crazy. But sometimes you have these like happy accidents and these weirder things that don't really follow a specific formula. And that's what the old stuff was like. It was just dudes like on machines, like pushing mute on a mixer and like bringing in like effects and sends and stuff like on a Mackie mixer, like in their like little Radio Shack studio back in like the 90s or something. And that worked too. It's like more natural. It's more like it's physical at that point. So anyways, the mouth to mouth was kind of like a combination of the two. And then I started playing it around the house. This was right before the Detroit Electronic Music Festival, as it was called then. So I played it for my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but she was my girlfriend then. And she heard it and was like, yeah, this is good. And I'm like, I think this is special. Like there's something happening. And we just didn't know. And I played it in the car. It sounded good. And then I gave it to like everybody that festival. And like Rich ended up closing his set with it like at the festival that year. And like everybody went like ape shit. And I was like, okay, like this is cool. And then we released it like a year later. Back then, it just took a lot longer. Yeah, that was it. But yeah, I try to leave it as live as possible.